Hey everyone, it's Naima here, and today is the first video in a series of 4 videos coming up to discuss the 4 different phases of the menstrual cycle. Today's video we're going to start with phase number 1, which is the menstruating time of the body. But before we dive into that, I just wanted to give a brief overview of what the menstrual cycle is in its entirety. And when I say brief, I really mean brief because there's so much detail I could go into this, which is why I'm breaking it down into separate videos. But I just want you to have a jumping off point from where the menstrual cycle begins and where it ends so you can understand a little bit of your orientation here. So, the menstrual cycle is an entire cycle. It encompasses all 4 phases, and those 4 phases are menstruation, follicular phase, ovulation, and a luteal phase. And all those 4 phases move in a cyclical way. They're not linear in which one starts and one stops. They kind of blend into each other as we cycle. And this cycle just continues over and over and over again from the moment you get your period when you're younger until you go through menopause when you're older. And these 4 phases of the cycle are carried forth by the 4 different main reproductive hormones in the female body. And those reproductive hormones send out chemical signals at different times in the cycle to create the cyclical nature of these 4 phases unfolding. So we have the pituitary gland, which is a big part of the female endocrine system, and the ovaries, which is another part of the endocrine system, and these 2 glands work together to send messages in the body to make these 4 phases happen and make it possible for life to potentially evolve. So, we as women or female-bodied people have this amazing roller coaster of a dance of hormones in our body. We tend to kind of go like this with our hormones. Like if you were to Google female reproductive system hormones graph on Google, you would see this line graph that just kind of goes up and down like this. And that is because we have all of these different mechanisms going on in our body to make ovulation happen and to make our bleeding happen and to make it possible for life to grow. So when we start menstruating, what's happening is our hormones have just gone through this dance and then they start to fall off this cascading hill and then they flatline. And when the hormones flatline, that signals the body to bleed. And we bleed. So, why do we bleed in the first place? Well, we're mammals, and biologically speaking, we bleed to procreate. There's other amazing benefits that come from having a menstrual cycle and moving through this cycle, like physiological and health benefits, but overall, the main purpose behind bleeding and the cycle as a whole is so we can procreate and carry forth new life. So, when you think about that, from the time that we finish bleeding until the time that we start to bleed again, there's these 3 other phases that we go through, and what our body is doing is essentially building up a new endometrial lining, or the uterine lining, the inner part of the uterus, to make this amazing environment for a possible fertilized egg to grow. So what happens is that the endometrium, the uterine lining, starts to grow with tissue and more blood comes through this area and it becomes highly vascularized because after or during ovulation, if an egg were to become fertilized, the egg is going to then travel down and attach onto the side of the uterus and implant there where the cells would then start to multiply and grow and turn into an embryo and eventually a fetus and a full-grown baby. It's amazing. It's super spectacular. So our body needs this really rich, blood-filled, nourishing tissue for that egg to possibly grow. So that is why our bodies create all this blood for this potential life. But 99% of the time when we ovulate, we're not actually going to have our egg become fertilized. I mean, think about how many periods you have in your life. And maybe you'll make a choice at some point in your life to have a child or 2 or 6 or none. And essentially you're going through this huge biological process to procreate when most of the time you're not going to be procreating. So when that happens, when the egg does not become fertilized, The hormones recognize, your body recognizes that, your hormones respond to that, the hormones drop down, fall off of that roller coaster, they flatline, and it signals your body that it can release all that blood and tissue that it just made, and then the cycle will repeat all over again. It's pretty remarkable when you think about this, that we are constantly, as female-bodied people, moving through these stages every single day. Your period is so much more than just this one thing that happens every month. Every single day, your hormones are shifting and changing and carrying forth these physiological functions so you can possibly create life. It's amazing. And even though you're not creating life, there's so much more you can create with all that energy your body is putting forth. And that will be coming up in another video. But back to bleeding times. When you do bleed, just some food for thought, that's a lot that your body is going through. I mean, just describing what led up to you bleeding in the first place, it's a lot of work that your body's doing, and it's remarkable. And when your body does bleed, and when you're having your period, or you're on your moon, or whatever you like to call it, it's a time where you're physically shedding skin and tissue from the inner lining of your uterus out through your teeny tiny cervix, pushing that, pumping it out, contracting it out, down through the vaginal canal, and out. That's a lot. And that is a time that I really recommend for you to rest. At least the first 2 days of your cycle. So when I rest the first 2 days of my cycle and take it more easy and maybe not work, or if I have to work, at least like I come home from work and I feed myself a really nourishing meal and I lay down and I wrap myself in something warm and I sleep more and I rest, and I'm aware that this thing that my body is going through is a lot in of itself and I don't need to be doing all the time. And I recommend the same for you. When I rest during the first 2 days of my cycle, it dramatically helps my body to recharge and have the energy that I need to have to carry forth the rest of the cycle that I'm about to go through. So that when I do arrive to my time right before my period, that premenstrual time that can sometimes feel like extra sensitive, and I can become easily agitated or more cocooned and just less outgoing, when I do arrive to that time, it's not as intense for me. And I've noticed a correlation when I do rest the first couple days of my period and what happens with the rest of my cycle. So tune in for your own cycle and see if you can notice any subtle changes with decisions or choices that you're making around your lifestyle and how you're using your energy for the best benefit of you. So that's just a little bit of an introduction about what is happening in the first phase of the menstrual cycle, menstruation. And in the next videos coming up, we're going to move on to talk about the follicular phase, which is all about eggs maturing. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.